I am really excited to be here with all of you. And I love it that we're focusing on systems, because systems really do allow you to have the successes that you want. And the area that I'm going to be focusing in on are the human systems. We have systems for transportation and communication, systems that, because we're so accelerated, we don't even realize some of the times how complex they are because we become so comfortable with them. Kind of a little bit of a newer frontier are the human systems. People recognize a need for them, but they really can't understand what exactly comprises human systems. So I'm going to be talking about some of that today, and hopefully be able to give you a little bit of a broad stroke, but drill down to some real practical systems that you can take away today. The kinds of people needed to succeed. Think about just for a second, just reflect on, you have goals. You have goals for the new year. You have goals for the next 5 years. You have challenges that you're facing. And the question you want to ask yourself is, what kind of people do I need to achieve those goals and to address those challenges and overcome those challenges? So one of the things I'm going to be asking you guys to do a couple of times in this period that I'm talking is I'm going to ask you to do a very simple process. And it's to last seconds as opposed to minutes. And what it is I'm going to ask you a question. Like in this case, I'm going to say, what kind of people do you need? And I want you to just reflect for a second on that. And then I want you to turn to somebody next to you or behind you. And in just a few seconds, I want you to take a breath, think about what that answer is, and in 1 or 2 words, answer what that question would be. So like, for example, with Bill, I would say,
I'd like people to be responsible and accountable.
Okay, responsible and accountable. And I want people to be mature and caring. And then turn back to me immediately so that we're just continuing on. Okay, so I'll be having you do that because I want you to be able to kind of think in each moment. So that's the question for right now. What kind of people do you need to overcome your challenges and achieve your goals? So go ahead and do that right now. And then just turn back as soon as you're done. They kind of smile. They smile. Connects them. Okay. Come on back. Come on back. It's a little bit difficult to put it into 1 or 2 words, isn't it? So I want you to, one of the things that we do is we do overcomplicate things. So allow yourself to know the simplicity of that. Oh gosh, if I could only pick 1 or 2 things, it would be this, okay? So the reason that we need human systems is because we have really evolved, but not necessarily addressed human systems that correspond with our evolution. You know, there have been many centuries where we've gone through a lot of survival, you know, coming over on the Mayflower and all of the things that people have gone through with the Great Depression and the changes in our social climate. And so we're moving from that survival mode into that creativity and innovation. And so what happens is the goals have changed. Even our schools were created to help create compliant factory workers. Well, we don't need that so much anymore. It's not to say we don't need that at all, but really we need people that are able to communicate well, to create community and collaborate on all of these forward-thinking possibilities now. So the new priorities are to migrate from the old command and control systems, do what I say because I'm the boss and I'm paying your check, to people having a lot of internal leadership. And how would you, with whatever size your company is, develop the internal leadership capacity of the people that you work with so that they're effectively managing their relationships and their productivity and their level of engagement? Most of us don't know how to go about doing that. So this is some statistics that most of you that have ever seen my presentations will have seen. But I think they're still so important to consider that we're sort of like fish in the water that don't realize that we're in the water. That there are so many people that are either actively disengaged or disengaged. The Gallup organization studied 700,000 American workers, and they found that 16% of the American workforce are what's called actively disengaged. These are people that are stressed out, sick, having a lot of calamities. They're often gossiping, doing a lot of negative sabotage. They're using intimidation tactics, harassment, rude behavior, very disruptive. They're the naysayers. They're the people that you come in the room and you can feel the room energy go down, okay? What they found is that these people cost an organization an average of $16,000 a year. And what's even more important to consider is that this starts in our families. And so everything that I teach around systems can be applied in family life, in schools, that sort of thing. But there are kids that are kicked out of preschool, kids that are doing bullying and being unable to cope with bullying. There are kids in gangs, kids dropping out of school, kids doing violence, drugs, and alcohol. There are kids that are getting pregnant when they're kids. So you all probably can have pictures of both the adults and the children in this category. And in a workplace, these people don't go away. They're the hanger-oners. You can't get rid of them, but they're really disruptive and they cost you. The next group is challenging because of just the size of this group. 55% of people are just simply disengaged. They're called 9-to-5ers because they're showing up, but they're really eager to just get out the door. I'm here for the paycheck. When they're there, their mentality is, it's not in my job description, sorry, I can't help you. They're often apathetic and bored, and they're wasting time. They're the ones that are constantly texting and calling and having conversations that are not productive. And so what they found is that these people didn't really cost revenues, but they didn't gain any revenues, which in my mind is a cost. Because when you're not producing, you may not be hurting anything, but you're not bringing any gains. So with kids, these are the kids that are often morose, sort of negative. They're not in the principal's office all the time, but they are not good communicators. They're often getting low grades when they're capable of getting higher grades. They're usually disrupting and bringing down the engagement of other kids, and they're often not helpful. Okay, so really what we want to fulfill those goals and overcome those challenges are people that are fully engaged. What they found is that only 29% of American workers overall, in a regular manner, are what's called fully engaged. These are good team players. They feel good to be around. They look good. They take good care of themselves. They're happy people. They're positive people. They take reasonable risks. What they found is that these people earn the organization $32,000 a year on average. And they won't stay in your culture if it's not a healthy culture, if it doesn't have healthy human systems. With kids, these are the kids that come to school and go to work prepared. They get along with adults even when they're teens. They get along with their peers. They love to learn, and they're helpful. So you probably can picture people in all of these categories. So how does this happen? How is it that we create people that are not so fully engaged? How come 71% of the population is in that lower, less productive category? Part of it is because we have old-standing, outdated beliefs that using control-driven approaches is the way to create good citizens in our homes, our schools, and in our workplaces. So 3 of the approaches that we use that are control-driven are an autocratic approach, where the belief that you have about people, whether you're conscious of it or not, is that they can't really be trusted. I have to be in charge of their good behavior. I have to make them do the right thing. When we do that, we believe that the management approach should be to manage them. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Well, I'm a manager, that's my title, that's what I do. I manage people. I set their goals, I delegate their work. But their accountability then is focused on following my procedures, my policies, what I'm in charge of. If I'm not there, you don't know what's going to happen if I'm operating from this control approach. So the kinds of people that you cultivate are often people that become compliant, but from a place of resentful compliance. they are either doing only what they're told, or they'll move into that actively disengaged kind of rebellious stage. Another control approach that most people are surprised by is an incentives-driven approach. There is tons of research that shows that while rewarding and incentivizing work with lab rats, in people, there's a negative counterproductive result. I have a new potential prospect right now that says we spend X amount of dollars every month incentivizing our people, trying to catch them doing something right, and it's really one of the worst things you could do. The reason for that partly is because our belief about people is that they're selfish and lazy, and if I don't hold a carrot out, they're not going to perform well. Well, that's already holding people in that negative mindset. Our belief is that it's my job to motivate others, that I have to externally motivate you to do the right thing. And then you become accountable to achieving my quotas and my goals. What this does is it sets up people who become competitive, who hide their mistakes because they don't want to lose their bonus or incentive, who rush through things and become competitive and sort of greedy, like, well, what's in it for me? And you'll find over time that you have to keep upping the incentive for them to be motivated that way. The third control method, and by the way, you can use all three of these simultaneously, and many people do, is called the measurement approach. And in that, your belief is people must prove that they meet my ideals, that they meet my ideal measures of whether they're good or bad, right or wrong, whether they've earned my respect, earned my approval and my praise. When you do this, your belief is that by evaluating them, I'm letting them earn the right to participate and to be engaged. People then become accountable to meeting my standards. Kind of see a theme here? It's all about me, it's not about them. And what happens is you create a lot of brown nosers, a lot of conformists that are really behaving based on, am I okay? Do you like me? Do you approve of me? Are you disappointed in me? That takes people's focus away from doing something for the reasons that are more important to be doing things. And even like with kids, you can see this all the time. Then they have to do drugs to be approved of by their peers, or they have to do, some other things that they don't want to be doing because it's all about, I have to please you. So these are things that we do well-intentioned, but that are actually counterproductive. And the reason they're counterproductive is because they're all based on systems to externally motivate people instead of strengthening the internal motivation of people. So I want you to take a second. I want you to turn to the person next to you and literally keep it to a couple seconds and then turn back to the front and share with the person next to you, do you find that you use any of these control approaches? There you go. Do you? I don't think you do either. I don't think you do either.
There was a time when I did.
Yes. You've already learned this.
Believe me, it's hard.
Sometimes I think I feel like that is supposed to be. Sometimes I
I like that. Okay. Much better. Much better at coming back quick. Thank you. Okay, so what system would be more helpful? It's a responsibility-based approach. I was just at a talk the other day that was about how do you create a culture of accountability. Well, this is the kind of approach you would have to take to create a culture of accountability. It's called a responsibility-based approach. The belief that you have to hold about people are that they are and they like to be great. And when they're not acting that way, they're discouraged. Now, they may not look discouraged, but the 4 core needs that all people have are to feel empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing. And when they don't feel one or more of these, they won't act so great. And yet we do things like even those control-driven approaches that don't make them feel so empowered, lovable, connected, or contributing. And it's the basis of all misbehavior and disconnection and disengagement. So when you hold that belief about people, your leadership approach becomes one of moving to mentoring or wise counsel. Instead of managing people, motivating them, and evaluating them, I appropriately guide them and make myself connected to them in a new way. And I'm going to give you one of the systems that I want to give you some practical information on is this whole role of what does it mean to move from a manager, evaluator, and incentivizer to somebody that is wise counsel or mentor. How would I do that? What happens is people then own their tasks and they become accountable for their performance because your job is to transfer responsibility to them effectively. And that's what most of us don't know how to do in human systems. What occurs then is you have people that are self-starters, that are open and creative and proactive and accountable. They're those people that are the 29% right now that are fully engaged. So if you want to increase the number of people in your organization that are fully engaged, you want to change the way that you approach leading them. Now most people, because this is about building intrinsic motivation, because we've done so many of the control methods, it's almost as if we were carrying people around and now their legs are atrophied and they don't know how to stand on their own two legs. So there's got to be this conscious movement away from the extrinsic motivation and a conscious movement toward how do we develop the intrinsic motivation. So that's a second system that I'm going to be ending with at the end of my presentation. So one of the things I wanted this slide for is to let you know that there is a very complete system for transforming your culture to a responsibility-based, accountability-based culture. I just want you to know that because I was at this presentation the other day where people got the idea why it was important to have a culture like this, but how the heck do I get my arms around it? And the person that was doing the presentation happened to say, I don't have that part. So there is that part, and I want you to know that it is possible. Just like when you go to buy a computer, you don't have to know everything that's in the guts of that computer, but you have to know that there's a system there and that somebody's able to walk you through the parts that you need to know about how to implement that computer system. Okay, so one of the things I said is that you got to move from this managing, motivating, and evaluating to this mentoring way of being with people. So here are some of the things that are benefits of that. When you mentor your people, they become more, they participate more, they perform better, and they produce more. They become happy and healthy and holistic because you're holding the belief about them that they are great and that they want to be great, and that you're assuming that, and that you're assuming their capability when you're transferring that responsibility to them. So they become more powerful. They think more positively, they communicate more effectively, they act more responsibly, they feel more fulfilled. Here's the things that you want to know. In your handouts, which are, it's the pages, not this one, oops, not the one with the colorful chart, but these pages that say, what are the things I would mentor on? It gives you some practical steps you can do if you decide to start sitting down with your people and mentoring them. What you have to do is you have to be willing to say, how are you doing on your relationships? How are you doing on your productivity? How are you doing on your sense of engagement? What would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? And then here's what I'd give you on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm observing that you're having a problem with this particular client or this particular coworker. So there's some questions and some processes you can do should you decide to start making a process around sitting down every week with your people, your direct reports, and mentoring them. You want to communicate encouragement and appreciation. Take time to say, I really appreciate you as an employee. These are the things I'm observing in you that I'm grateful for. We don't do that. We don't give people that feedback regularly. You will help them to develop a blueprint plan for their own progress around their own goals, their own visions, their own values, how it integrates with the company's. You'll monitor intrinsic motivators, which we're going to cover. And you'll align each person with the organization's values and the 8 values that build trust and the company's purpose. And you'll offer leadership opportunities for them, because remember, your goal becomes, how do I develop your leadership? How do I transfer responsibility to you as if you are a leader? So you want to be able to offer the opportunity for them to practice this and feel competent in it. And then you guide them in adopting skills. Okay? So this one is in your handout. I'm going to quickly go through it. It is one of my favorite things of everything that I teach, because it's at the core of how do you have an internal leader that isn't just doing things from resentful compliance, but is doing things from commitment and willingness to be seeking more excellence. There is a mindset that all of us have the option to go into, and it's called the other-directed mindset. Now, by other-directed, I don't mean, oh, I'm a selfless person that's just doing things for others. What this is about is, I actually don't believe my authority is within me. I'm feeling as if my authority is somewhere out there. And when I believe that, I'm saying things out loud or in my head like, oh, I have to do that. Or I should or I need to do that. I ought to do that. Or I can't do that. When we're in that mindset, we have authority figures that are either outside of us that are real, or inside of us, like teachers and Sister Mary Josephine in 2nd grade saying you're going to go to hell if you do this or that. Or it might be our parents, but it could be real external authority figures that we become in a disempowered state over. So when we're in that belief of I have to do something, I have no choice, and that there's this authority outside of me, one of the attitudes we can take is to resentfully comply, which is a reaction from fear. When we resentfully comply, we don't feel responsible for things. We feel like a victim, and we act like a victim. The things we don't feel responsible for are our tasks, our relationships, and our outcomes. The other attitude we can take, so we kind of feel like an Eeyore, and we look like an Eeyore. The other attitude we could take that's a reaction is to rebel and resist and say to that authority, no, I won't, you can't make me. When we do that, we're also not feeling responsibility for the tasks, the outcomes, and the relationships. And our behavior has a mean-spirited quality to it. So I'll just give you a quick couple examples. I was dating a guy one time, and he wouldn't wear a safety belt. And I said to him, just out of curiosity, why don't you wear your safety belt? Because my father never wore his, but I knew exactly why he didn't. And this guy said to me, I'm not letting the government control me. And I said, the government isn't even in the car with us. And on top of it, I realized he wasn't considering the consequences to his behavior, okay? So when we're doing it from that place, we're kind of like, no, I won't, you can't make me. And it's a very childish, weak, and disempowered state. And I'm sure he felt very empowered in himself saying it that way, but it wasn't from freedom. Another quick example is, let's say there's a teenager and her room is a wreck, and she says, I'm going to go out with my friends, and the mom says, no, you're not, your room's a wreck, and if you think you're going to go out today, you can't, there's no way, and she thinks, I don't have a choice. And so she cleans that room resentfully. How clean is it going to be? It's not going to be an A or B, is it? It's going to be bare minimum. So, or if she doesn't do it at all, she'll say, no, I won't, you can't make me, and she'll even cut off her nose about not going out with her friends. If she goes and resentfully complies and does the room, and her friends say, why are you in such a bad mood? Who is she blaming? Is she saying, oh, I put myself in this bad mood? Or is she saying, Mom put me in this bad mood? Right? So there's no sense of, can you relate to this with your employees or with yourself? So this is a great description of that 55% of the population that is resentfully complying and doing just a disengaged kind of 9-to-5 job. This is a great representation of those people that are actively disengaged, correct? So 71% of the population is hanging out over here. So the point of it is we're not really free when we're in reaction. And everything we do from I should, I have to, I ought to is going to bring about negative consequences. Did you say something? No? Okay. So where we want to be is in the self-directed camp. What am I feeling and what do I want is what we're asking ourselves when we're in this mindset. One of the attitudes we could take is to say I agree or I disagree, which in the surface looks like the same thing. The behavior could look the same. I'm doing the room or I'm doing the room. But from one, I'm doing it at 100% and in alignment. Or I could be saying no, and it has a totally different quality to how we're managing the relationships, the tasks, and our outcomes. When we are on this side, because we're not in reaction, we're in response, we're actually thinking through the positive and negative consequences of all our decisions, and we're choosing for those. So we're feeling the full responsibility for everything that's involved. And we also, because we're not in reaction, we have other options that we'll be able to think of for how we would do something, where we might say, you know, hey, I know I should be doing my room, but I'm going to ask my little brother to do it for me. Is that okay? Or could I do it tomorrow and do an extra chore? Or all kinds of things that would help us to get through that. So when we're doing that, we are in an accountable state. You want your employees to be in an accountable state. You yourself want to live from an accountable state. Only good comes from this, and that's where that 29% resides, is they're operating more regularly on that side of things, okay? So accountable just means that all of those things are lined up. So one of the systems that I want you to leave with today is understanding what it is to develop that intrinsic motivation in yourself and other people. So how do you go about doing that, and what does that mean? Intrinsic motivation is simply a fancy word for loving what you do and loving who you are while you're doing it. So here are, just like when Bill teaches sales, I'm sure that there's a cycle that you have to go through in a particular order. Like if you're doing sales, you have to have your funnel of prospects. And then you have to be able to get your presentation set up. And then you have to know how to close those presentations. Like one has to follow the other. The same is true of intrinsic motivation. The first intrinsic motivator is, why am I doing anything? What's my why for it? Not just my why for the company, but what's my why for my task or my why for my role in the company? So this is a sense of meaningfulness. Now, if you look at your template on mentoring your people, you'll see a page that has these 4 squares, okay? The kinds of questions that you as a leader, your role as a leader, if you're leading others or in your own life, is to build inspiration, or to draw it forth is a better way to say it. Draw it forth from your people. So you want to be asking yourself, if my employee is stuck in this sense of meaningfulness, these are the kinds of questions I would ask them or ask myself about how to help them. You know, how will I help this employee with cynicism? How will I help this employee identify their passion for the job that they're doing? Those are the kinds of things that you would focus on. If you ignore this, most people start with the quadrant that I'm going to introduce over here, and we ignore the first 2. But if people don't understand the reason for what they're doing, they won't be inspired and excited about doing it. Okay, so that's a task purpose. The second intrinsic motivator is a sense of choice, and we totally underestimate that. Remember I said one of those core needs is that people want to be able to contribute. So if you're not giving them choice, they don't have a sense of being able to contribute. So if your person that you're working with, that you're mentoring on a given day, and you realize where they're stuck is not in the sense of meaningfulness, but it's in the sense of choice, the kinds of questions you're going to ask yourself and them are, how will I delegate tasks to this employee? How will I set up ways to demonstrate that I trust them, that I can give them some freedom of choice in there, some ownership? So those are the kinds of things, because your role as a manager or leader is handing off things, delegating, transferring responsibility at every opportunity so that they can actually exhibit their leadership that you're teaching them to have. So these are task activities. Another task activity is the sense of competence. The person's questions are, am I doing a good, high-quality job, or the work that I'm doing, am I doing it well? Am I competent? Bill talked about competence a little and how it breaks trust. It breaks trust with yourself when you don't feel competent. If most people, what they do is they start with a new employee and they teach them all the skills of the trade, but they don't spend time on, do they have a sense of meaningfulness, and do they have adequate amount of choice? Can you see how if you teach this and they don't have the first 2, they can't really do much with this, even if it's really great training or great support? The fourth intrinsic motivator is going back to the task purpose. Are you finding time and ways to celebrate the progress that people make? If all you do is teach them skills and give them ownership, but you don't ever stop and say, hey, woohoo, look what you just did, look what we just did, they're going to get burned out. So the questions that your job as a leader is to be a scorekeeper and a cheering section. Not so much from praising them, but from just observing. Hey, I noticed that you set this goal for yourself and you achieved it. How do you feel about that? So you want to ask things like, how will I make sure this employee is well supported by the extended community for his or her needs, or for to be able to share their contributions? So hopefully this will be a little bit of a system for you to start mentoring your team or your employees, should you want to move toward a more responsibility-based, accountability-based system in the way that you lead the people that you work with. Because your ultimate goal is to transfer responsibility to them and help them become fulfilled from the inside out instead of just pleasing you from the outside in. Does that make sense? So those blue words are just kind of highlighting what your role would be. If it's for yourself, those are the jobs you would do internally to develop your own internal motivation. And then just the processes, commit to meaningful purpose, choose the activities to accomplish it, which means that this is where you would create your own plans for what you're going to do by when, and the strategies and procedures for how you're going to accomplish things. And then you would perform those activities, and then you would monitor the progress toward those activities so that you could celebrate success. So that's hopefully will give you a couple things to take away and start applying. Does anybody have any questions?